Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Perception Paradox. My name is Juvela, and I'm the host of Perception Paradox. Today, I am joined by Dr. V. Boykin, and together we explore the complexities of identity, resilience, and the importance of community and mentorship in navigating life's challenges. Dr. Boykin shares her personal journey from being a single mom, a felon, a former stripper, to earning multiple degrees and becoming a leader in workplace equity, emphasizing the power of choice and the necessity of compassion in the face of adversity. She is also author and speaker, equity advocate. She wrote a book, Fix Your Face and Watch Your Tone, Woman. And yeah, she does emphasize the need for personal growth through experiences and the necessity of truth and boundaries in life. And Dr. Boykin also shares her insights from her journey as an author, highlighting the challenges women face in leadership roles and the importance of sharing one's truth. So, you are up for a treat today. Let's dive in and enjoy. Real people, real stories, and real challenges that break the status quo. I'm your host, Jivila, and welcome to Perception Paradox.
I, as an American, don't know what to say to the world other than this. I'm a patriot. I love my country. I criticize my country because I love my country. The American flag belongs to me, even though it seems to have been co-opted by this very far right-leaning ideology that in and of itself grates against the Constitution of the United States. And people like me are what makes America great and great again. And it is not this this co-opted narrative that seems to be going viral, not just in the US, but around the world, which is the exclusion of different types of people. And the part of it that makes it most confusing for me is the literal survival of the human species is based upon our differences. Like if we all ate apples and there was an apple famine, we're done. If we all liked warm weather, right? And there was some catastrophic heat wave in hot areas, we're done. It's the fact that we think differently, we like different things, we identify closer to different concepts, ideals, beliefs, values, ways of living that has allowed us to endure. And so the erasure of those differences is nonsensical. It's not even a question of good or bad. It just fundamentally, from a survival perspective, is foolishness.
Yeah, but well, the world is going nuts right now, and I do believe it's both Europe and also in the US. It's kind of wild uncertainty. And how do you cope with that? And how do you find the communities around you? Should you protest?
Which rally are we going to show up for? There would need to be about 500, no, let's be real, about 50 different rallies going on right now for all of the things going on. And I wouldn't know which one to join. And I think that's part of the
Draw.
tactic, but that's also part of the reality. Would I
Yeah.
go to like, all these protests need to go on simultaneously. Which one am I going to? The disenfranchise of women and the stripping of their rights, like the anti-unions, where did our union go? We need to give more power to our unions. It's protesting on behalf of the fellow, federal workers. Like you wouldn't know where to show up. The executive orders, the loss of birthright citizenship. I mean, the list goes on. How do I cope? I don't know that I'm coping. I think right now I'm literally just existing and then trying to have dialogue, ask questions that allow people the space to question what they're believing, including myself, what they're following, and just give a voice to the confusion. I think that's where it starts. The challenge is when you have people that are involved in what we would probably call guerrilla warfare, these quick attacks and shifting landscape, it's very hard to win that battle using peace and harmony. I didn't say impossible, but it is hard. So at some point, you have to become more focused on outcomes and less focused on the feelings that you're having about the outcomes you see. That's really tough for people who would like to live their life in a very pacifist centered way, if that makes any sense. And if not, nothing else in the world is making sense, so then it's okay, right?
That makes sense. Yes, sometimes we need to put the emotions aside. Very great professor and also a book author, Mr. James Doyle, would mention that compassion and being open, being vulnerable actually would help to save the world and to make it a better place and to recharge and reunite the human beings. So I do believe that in some way it's also part of a potentially we could cope maybe in the world.
I think that goodness and kindness and compassion and empathy is the foundation of a more perfect union, of a coming together. That comes at a cost. And you've seen it from most religious leaders, from those people that we have the most respect for, is this response to anger, this response to violence, this response to aggression with compassion. We've seen it win in the end over and over. We've also seen an extremely high cost of this benevolent response. It's my default response.
Dear audience who are listening today, I guess you are up for a treat. We're diving straight into the conversation with Dr. V. And we always think, I'm not sure if I can change that, but if we start the change within in our small communities, we can do a big change. And I guess that's a very great intro into our conversation for today because we met through our shared friend, mentor,
Yeah.
Dan Tyre,
Yeah.
amazing, incredible human being. And we just jumped on a call, we connected, we synced. I read your book
Thank you.
and I think one word that really shows and for me connects with you is resilience and change and courage. Courage to lead, courage to actually get closer to authentic self, courage to get out of some kind of restricted environments, restricted beliefs, which is, I guess, very important part. So, dear audience who are listening today, I guess you are up for a treat. We're diving straight into the conversation with Dr. V to uncover your story. And yeah, what does it take actually within or outside to go from a young man, food stamps, and working as a stripper, going to prison, to actually earning 4 degrees, including a PhD, which was like in what, 4 years, and becoming a leader in a workplace.
Thank you. That introduction sounds amazing. Like, I want to know that person, whoever she is. She's doing great things and she's done great things. I did earn 4 degrees in my 40s, a BS, a MS, a MBA, and a DBA. And I am a felon. I am a former stripper. I am a former single mom or mom with a man absent from the home, which I think is a better way to say it because we say single mom as if the women that continue to show up somehow get this label and the men are totally disregarded from it. I was a mom without a father in the home. I stayed and did the work. And that's not, and there's many different ways and many different reasons that can occur. But I think that the labeling of single mom makes it seem like the woman is missing or absent for something. But to set the stage, in America, our incarceration rates are extreme. And it is incredible how the disparity and the over sentencing occurs, especially for BIPOC, Black, Indigenous people of color in America. So, for example, Black people make up about 12% of the population, give or take, but we will make up 26, give or take, percent of the incarcerated population. And the highest incarcerated demographic is Black males, but they are not the highest percentage of the population. It's because our neighborhoods are over policed and because we're over sentenced. So someone like me, I was a single mom with 2 small children. I was involved in committing a felony, a non-violent, non-drug related felony. I had had a speeding ticket before this, a speeding ticket. And then I got this very harsh sentence. The original sentence was 2 10-year sentences stacked, which means I would have served 10 years, had to hit parole, and then started serving the second 10 years, which I'm not sure what good that harsh sentence would have done, but there was a problem in the sentencing. They came back with 3 years concurrent. And my attorney immediately said, sign this. And so I ended up, I think it was spending around 8 months in prison. So from speeding ticket to prison. And I was in Texas at the time, which has a harsh incarcerated experience. You know, when it's 95 to 100 degrees outside and you're in a cement building that doesn't have windows that open, that doesn't have air conditioning, that's really tough. It's physically uncomfortable. And a lot of people will say, well, you're a felon, you're supposed to have that experience.
Hmm.
Yeah, but these are still people. And I wasn't sentenced to boiling alive, right? I wasn't sentenced to that. I was sentenced to being removed from my friends, my family, and society. And I think people really need to understand what you are sentencing someone to versus what the experience actually is. In the state of Arizona, they had tent cities. Arizona gets up to 115 degrees in the summertime. So to put someone in a tent with no airflow, with no air conditioning, that's not the sentence that was imposed by the courts. And so I could go off on a lot on that, but you know, felons are people. And if you're a Black person, I think it's like 1 out of 8 will face some sort of incarceration. So
Hmm.
there's that. But then we look at it when we zoom out, and I promise to come back in, but when we zoom out, you know, we have a president now that is convicted of 34 felonies. I still can't get a job at a gas station. So when you think about privilege and you want to say privilege doesn't exist, there's organizations I can't join right now that I would love to join, that I desperately want to join because I agree with their mission and I want to participate and I want to help out. I can't. I have a felony.
Okay.
But we have a cis white male who is president with a felony, who never spent a day in jail or a day in prison, and he has 34? Like, it just doesn't make sense. But to get back to your question, yes, I was also a stripper. I took my clothes off for money. I did it sober. I was not on drugs. I was not working my way through school, as people like to explain away. You know, I chose to monetize that which I could control. And by the way, at least here in the United States, women strippers out earn men. It is one of the few industries where women actually make more money. You set your own hours, you set your own rates, you negotiate, you know, you expand your book of business. You're an incredible salesperson
Hmm.
as somebody who is a stripper. And I I am not encouraging anyone to go down that route, but I'm definitely encouraging people to stop judging women that have chosen to go down that route, especially as you hang on the arm of your husband saying how wonderful he is. By the way, he was my client. So you're ostracizing me, but so proud of him, which, you know, well, we're familiar with the patriarchy, right? There it is.
Oh, wow. And so, okay, so before you got into the prison, that's when you were dancing, or was it
Yes.
after? Okay, so you
Yes, it
were
was
dancing there,
before.
making money, taking care of your child. Kids, you have 2 kids.
I have 2 kids. So I was working in corporate America. I had my first big girl job and, you know,
Yeah.
suits from the Express, which was a story here. And I was so proud. When I was accused of the felony and going through the process, well, you don't work anymore. It's very difficult to get a job. And so that is when I turned to dancing because I could put my kids to bed. I could get up with them in the morning. When they were sick, I could take off. I could set my own schedule. And I earned 6 figures. I mean, the amount
Wow.
of money you can earn is phenomenal,
Yeah.
especially when it was nowhere near what I was making in corporate America. Like it was just incredible.
That's really wild. All right. And somewhere in your book, I think I read that when you ended up actually going to prison and spending there the months, that there was a change that happened within, that you kind of set up a routine that really gave good for you while being there. You did not get yourself involved into any kind of internal battles, riots, but used time for good. How did you use that time? Because you could not leave, right? So you were stuck there. So you had to make most out of it, I guess.
I think, you know, one of the things that I think I've always been aware of in some form of fashion is this space between stimulus and response. You can't always control the stimulus, and it may feel like you can't control the response, but that space in between, that's yours. And how expansive that space becomes, that pause between I hit you, I say ouch, and I decide to hit you back or not hit you back. That's the space you own. And I was very aware when I was incarcerated that I didn't want to become incarcerated. I was incarcerated, but I didn't want to become incarcerated. I didn't want to use my language. I didn't want to lose my name. I didn't want to lose what was important to me. I knew that this was temporary, as excruciatingly long as it felt. It was a temporary state. And so for me, I just decided that I was going to be who I truly am instead of what the system may want to make me into, because the system wanted to make me callous. The system wanted to make me less educated. The system wanted to make me less than. The system, everything is designed to make you deteriorate into the worst example of a human being. Resources are limited. Safety is limited. Productivity is limited. That delivers, as Maslow will tell you, the worst possible person. And I just wasn't going to be that. And so I didn't say curse words. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't engage in relationships that would cause disruption or challenge. I just wasn't going to do it. And I had been a person that followed the rules before. Why would I change? I controlled the space between stimulus, prison, and response output. And I was going to remain me. And it was very hard to not be called by my name. It was very hard to not be seen as valuable. It was very hard to be okay just being by myself. But that was the space that I came to.
How did you find strength to wake up every day with some power and not losing the hope?
Well, the truth of the matter is you don't have a choice. You don't have a choice to wake up. Your body is going to wake you up. And, I get asked that question a lot. It's not bravery. It's not intention. It's not will. It's not any of the things I want it to be, because wouldn't that be a beautiful story? And I want to tell that story. I decided and I was brave and I made a commitment and I had this moment. The truth of the matter is you wake up. You wake up. You're not allowed to stay in bed all day. There's that. Not if you're following the rules. And you could catch a case if you lay in bed all day. Your choices are limited. So I just did what I had to. My eyes opened, I had to wake up. Now, what I choose to say, share, how I chose to respond to the feeling, that was within my control. But you have to wake up every day. I truly thought when I was separated from my babies, I truly thought I would die. You actually don't die, which means you have to wake up.
That's tough.
It's very tough. And people say all the time, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Yeah, that's a very famous one, right?
It's the most nonsensical thing I've ever heard. It makes it seem as if trauma and stress and ill treatment is somehow good because of the outcome. That's so false and so serving to abusers and abusive systems. What makes you stronger is your ability to expand the space between stimulus and response. Prison gets no credit for making me stronger. Those that have wronged me get no credit for making me stronger. That's me. That's me. That's my ability to decide how I choose to respond instead of being sucked under in the undertow. And as someone that does like a bit of control, I refuse to allow someone else's actions to dictate who I become.
That's beautiful to hear that you continued owning your own story and writing it rather than someone writing it for you, no matter the circumstances. How did the life change after you went back to your kids and back to the society?
Well, everything was different. I tried to step back into where I had left. My friends were different, or I was different in conjunction with them. Physically, I looked different. I was in like the best shape of my life. I do not recommend that, especially in a predatory environment. But I had just done, I'm committed if nothing else. So if I was going to be taking my clothes off, like I was in amazing shape. So when I came out, I didn't look the same. My daughter was very sick when I came home. She had mononucleosis. She was very sick. My son was very sad. And I didn't have a job. I went from making a lot of money when I went in to making no money. I didn't have resources. I had sick children. I didn't have transportation. Like there was so much I just didn't have. And it is very hard to climb out of adversity when it's when it's a slide. There's no rungs on the ladder. A rung would be a job and a car and a babysitter and, a path forward. Like, you just don't have those rungs. So for me, the only choice I saw was to find people and find men to hide behind, to find men whose homes I could live in so my children could go to good schools, to find men where I could barter a relationship with them for care as I was rebuilding, which shouldn't be shocking because women do that all the time in marriage. Like, come on. I've been married several times. Ladies and gentlemen, you know when you're with someone because you have to be. You know that you are making these compromises all the time. Mine is just very much more cut and dry. But the women that I know have entered into relationships for convenience, for financial security, maybe for love that then turns into convenience and financial security. They shrink themselves, they hide their dreams. But I will say, I love marriage. I love being a wife. I love the idea of it. But when I came out, I was trying to stabilize.
Okay. So, and when did the degrees and your 7 years, right, of educational journey of 4 degrees, when did that fall into place? That sounds really also like another crazy addition. You're out, you're looking for job stability, rebuilding, and then not 1 degree, not two, but like four.
Well, thank you. So I got out in 2004. I went back to school in 2017. So there was some time. There was some time there. It's interesting because I was married when I started to go back to school, and he did very well for himself. I won't say we because our relationship was never a we. It just wasn't structured that way. He did very well. And I remember begging him for money to go back to school. I really didn't understand that I could have applied for federal funds and gone back to school at any time. It just didn't feel that way. And so I went back to school on a loan from my husband. You get loans from your husband, but anyways, I think it was $2,500 to start the semester, and then financial aid took it from there. And I had always been intelligent. Learning had never been hard for me. What had been hard for me was all the distractions of going to a campus and going to school and getting there and then coming home. And I didn't like that. I still don't like that part of it. So when online school came about, that was just the absolute perfect modality for me because I can learn and I can retain and I can do it extremely fast. I can submit a paper on anything that you want, probably within a week, whatever length you actually need it to be. 30 pages? Sure, no problem. And I could also retain information and pass a test. There were parts of school that were hard, but school itself was not hard for me. The Excel class I had to take, now it is true, the only time I put anything in the group chat, I don't think I need a degree. And all the credit to Western Governors University because the instructor called me back in like an hour and a half on an early Saturday morning. It was like, I heard you're having some trouble with the class. And I was like, oh, you read the chat. And he would not get off the phone until he felt certain that I was going to say, okay, I'm going to continue on. And that instructor deserves a great deal of credit for me being called doctor today because it could have ended right there.
Wow, that's pretty cool. So I guess that also brings us to another topic that perhaps both of us share. When we're going for those big goals and changes, I find it super valuable to kind of having some guidance and mentorship. That would be it. In my case, was pretty difficult when it comes to mentorship because usually, I don't know, it just seems like I would have a very non-traditional structured approach to my career and growth. So it took me long routes and trial errors to find the mentors that could actually grow together and support rather than trying to change me.
Yes.
What that sometimes happens, and sometimes I think it scares us off and makes a misconception what is mentorship about. When did mentorship and how did it come to your life? Because you've been mentioning it also in the books.
Yes.
So you had in your book, in your work environment and so on. How did your journey start?
Mentorship is critically important. I can't stress it enough. Women with a mentor are 56% more likely to get a job. Men with a mentor are 93% more likely to get a job. I mean, that's just, yeah.
That's huge numbers. I didn't know that.
Yes, that's from Weissel in 2011. He did a study, or they did a study, I should say. And it's really interesting because when I was doing my research, I came across this stat and it said 80% of women said it was their spouse or spousal equivalent that allowed them to achieve these high leadership positions within the tech space. And then the other statistic I found was 43% of women left the tech space after their first child. And as I was thinking it through, I was like, well, hold on. I've been married several times. I can't think of a time a spouse supported me that would have helped at all. And if half the women are dropping out, but half the women are saying, they need a spouse and that marriage typically leads to a child, like what gives? And I think as I was digging in, one of the key pieces was mentorship, someone to show you the way. And as I started looking back at the times that I failed most miserably, I didn't have anybody in my corner. I just didn't. And whether that was because I wasn't approachable or didn't seek it out, like I just didn't. And I remember when I met Dan Tyre, which was my first week where I was working, we worked at the same place, and his positivity and his energy and his enthusiasm. And I was just like, oh, that's really nice. And he told me to read a book and then I didn't, and off I went on my career. And I started hitting all these stumbling blocks. And someone was like, have you talked to Dan? And I reached back out to Dan Tyre, and there is something powerful and necessary about finding someone who has been where you're trying to go. And it shouldn't be shocking to anyone. If you ever go hiking, you typically are going along a path. Typically, when you hike along that path, there's these markers to tell you you're on the right path. You do that so you don't get lost in the woods, which would be dangerous. But as we go through life and as we navigate professional careers, the road markers aren't as clear. But there is someone who has been where you're trying to go before. And you need that person to tell you when you're off track and to also show you the path up the mountain. And it's not that you can't get to the top without them, but there's going to be somebody that's literally trying to get to the same top. And with a guide, they get there in 4 days. Meanwhile, 7 years later, you're still wandering around the base of the mountain, unable to get out. I live in Arizona, and South Mountain and I have gotten lost together many times. I just needed a guide.
Yeah, we do go circles if we don't seek out for guidance, actually. I've been many times in this situation myself.
And you just want somebody to drop from the sky and say, this is your way home, or this is your way forward. That's what a mentor does. And everybody deserves to know which way is home, which way is forward. It's foolish to think that you don't need that. And it's just as foolish to think that you can't provide that to someone else. So I don't know if the question is so much, when did I get a mentor? But when did I start mentoring others? Because that's one of the greatest gifts you can give someone, is the gift of saying, hey, this is the easier path. This is the straighter path. Or this path is going to be rough and I'm going to help you with it. How could you not?
Is that part of your current mission? You've been working a lot, right, with DEI programs, women empowerment especially. From your LinkedIn activities, I can also follow and see huge support for actually empowering more diversity and in general bringing more women, especially if I understood correct, from working families out of the household chores to actually also realizing themselves in the professional way.
Yeah, I think, well, look, I'm just a smart businesswoman. And, a lot of times people think of diversity, equity, and inclusion as some sort of charity case or some sort of pass to someone that is less educated or less capable. I can assure you, if you are able to consider a candidate that has had to crawl and scratch and work twice as hard, and you're going to have to take my word for it, or you're going to have to wait and come back in your next life to be somebody from a marginalized community, either one. But once we get there, we have worked so hard to get there. You will be better as a business pulling that person in. As someone with a felony, I'm afraid to lose my job constantly. I'm afraid to underperform constantly. It's so hard for me to get a job that when you get me, you get all of me doing the absolute best I can. You provide a clear mission and direction, I'm there. I can't afford to just hang out. I might not be here again. And so it is critically important to me that I am part of what makes businesses run better, which is diversity. And it's an easy thing to understand. Everybody, imagine you're standing in front of a fence. Some of us are shorter, some of us are taller. Regardless of our height, we all get a stool and we're all able to look over the fence. That would be equity, but we're talking about diversity. So we look over the fence. What do you see? Some people are going to look out towards the horizon. They're going to see the storm coming. Some people are going to look down, directly down on the opposite side of the fence. They're going to see the big boulders that we are about to trip over. Some people are going to look 10 feet out. They might see that warm pile of dog waste that we're about to step in. You see that storm on the horizon? That's literally the airbags in cars that were only tested on male-sized test dummies that kill women and small men. That rock on the ground, that's that thing that when you see that campaign where one of the genders were holding up the soda can with like the Black Lives Matter backdrop that totally tanked it was bad. It was really bad. Yeah, that's what that boulder is. And that steamy pile of dog waste, right? That's the hand sanitizer dispenser that doesn't work on brown skin because nobody in the room thought to test it on someone with brown skin. And now companies have to pay to replace those dispensers because they don't work for a significant segment of the population. You have to have diversity in the room because the men weren't thinking about smaller sized men and women when they made those airbags. But if a woman would have been there, she would have said, will this be safe for me? And it becomes critical. And so diversity isn't about if you're a good person or a bad person. It's about money. It's about business acumen. It's about smart decision-making in the business arena. So I don't question people who are against DEI as if they're good or bad people. I already know that. I know the answer to that. The question I want to ask you is, are you a smart business person? Because if you don't have a diverse group helping you make decisions, you're just not smart in business. And woke products sell more. And if you don't think it's true, why do we have pink razors and blue razors? Secret is strong enough for a man or made for a woman. Old Spice is now trying to convince me as a woman that I should buy their products, even though they position themselves as a woke men's product. So you have to look at the business case for it. It just makes dollars and cents.
For sure. Very well. I think one of the best expressions and explanations about in general why companies are not getting it right. So, but what is your approach about all those DEI programs? And because I can see a lot of just number games or failure to implement and execute and no actual, really, the numbers are not that good when it comes who's behind those programs and why they're doing. What's your experience since you're working with it yourself? What needs to change so we could actually shift our mindsets and start creating great environments at work?
Well, to set the stage, McKinsey came out with a report that was based on, I'm going to say it wrong, Vukovic and Associates.
College. Okay.
Yes, in 2024. By the way, I never learned vowel sounds, so I literally can't sound out words. I learned to sight read. That's a whole nother thing. But for every 100 men promoted to managers, approximately somewhere in the 80s, if you were to average it out, like in 2022, it was about 87 women were promoted to manager for every 100 men. When you look at Latino women, it actually goes down into the 70s. And when you look at Black women, it's funny, in 2022, we know what happened in 2020. It was a 96 Black women for every 100 men promoted to manager. In 2023, it went back down into the 50s, which is what it had been prior to 2022 and after, right? So, and it's interesting because women actually graduate at a higher rate than men from college. So it's not that we aren't more prepared, that we aren't more educated. The question is, what do we do about it? I think it comes down to, well, why would you want women in the workplace? And again, I say to you, because you don't want to pay class action settlements for airbags, like dollars and cents. But you have to understand that when women are introduced to the C-suite, you close a profit gap of 21%. That when diverse teams show up, they increase profitability by 15 to 35%. When people feel they belong, they are more productive. Some people say up to 80% more productive. So here's my question. If women actually do make more money in the workplace, why wouldn't you want them there? What is the benefit of not having them there? So the question isn't, why do you want women in the workplace? The question is, why wouldn't you? And when you think about that, not only does it not make sense, but it doesn't make, if you know scientifically that belonging in the workplace, when people feel they belong, there's 56% improved performance.
That's
If
a
you
big
want to
number.
make people feel, yes, 56. It's also 50% lower turnover and 75% fewer sick days when people feel they belong. Right? So scientifically, that's science. That's not opinion, that's science. If that is true, What group knows how to make someone feel they belong more than a group that understands what it feels like not to belong? So what do you have to do in the workplace to make more diversity? You have to believe that it's a good business decision.
How would you
That by
define?
my,
Oh yeah, go ahead.
but
Go ahead.
my very
Yeah.
presence will make your product better and your decision making better. If you don't believe that, if you're not a good business person, we need to start unrewarding people that don't follow and understand science, that aren't going to make the company money. And it's not your women or BIPOC people like they think. It's not the diverse hires that are costing you money. It's the undiverse hires that don't understand the value of diversity that are costing you money.
How would you define belonging?
Well, that's a
What
great
does it mean
question.
for you?
I think in the very tangible sense, belonging is when you are not sitting at work talking about how you don't feel you belong. And if you think about it, if everybody just were to take a moment, picture the last 6 months in the workplace, how many times did you hop on a call with a colleague after a company meeting, after a team meeting, after a one-on-one and say, I can't believe this person said that. I can't believe they said that. I can't believe they thought this way. I can't believe they didn't mention this. I can't believe this. I can't believe that. All of that eats at productivity. All of that eats at profitability. So in the workplace, it's the absence of those types of conversations. I think belonging is setting up a circumstance where a person knows to the core of their foundation that whatever comes next and whatever decision they make based on what comes next will be something that they will be valued for experiencing.
Nicely put and well thought through.
It doesn't mean that their experience won't be critiqued, redirected, redefined, challenged. It does mean whatever that experience was will be valued. That's all.
Beautiful. And then if we go into these topics, well, sometimes I feel we're on this constant quest and search, no matter where we are in life, of always a place to belong, sense of belonging, sense of safety, security, environment that actually resonates with where we're going through life. So if we would go to younger yourself, what would you tell for your current self?
This one's easy, surprisingly.
Mm-hmm.
I would tell my younger self that your entire purpose of being on this planet is to have experiences, literally, to have experiences, not to have good experiences, not to have bad experiences, not to have pleasant experiences or unpleasant experiences. You are here to have experiences. So as you have them, that is life. There's nothing to get started. There's no point where you're like, I'm finally living my life. Your literal entire purpose, because it's the only thing that makes sense. It makes sense across all religions. It makes sense across all the years of your life. It just makes sense. You're here to have experiences. And so when they happen, you don't have to be angry. You don't have to be mad. You don't have to be bewildered. You don't even have to question, why me? You're literally within your purpose of having experiences. And when those experiences are bad, they remind you that you're human. And when those experiences are good, they remind you of why you're human. And that's it. There's no greater secret, unlock, accomplishment you're supposed to have, no getting started point. You're doing it. You're not getting anywhere. It's a circle. You know, I hear my kids say, I can't wait to get started in my life. This is it.
Can't wait to finish school. Oh, I can't wait to finish university. Oh, I can't wait just to lose 5 kilos. Then my life gonna start.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
quite wild.
Oh, I
Somehow
can't wait to get married. I can't wait to be a mom. I can't wait to get the house I want. I can't wait to get this bag. I can't wait to get this dress. I can't wait to get this
it's
piece of
always I
jewelry.
can't wait. I can't
I
wait to
can't
go
wait.
on that vacation. I can't wait to get that flight. I think we should stop and rethink and ground ourselves more for present and actually, I like how you put it, experiencing life at its best and at its worst in a way.
I'll hear people say, oh, it's already Sunday and now I've got to go back to work. The weekend went so fast. That's valid feeling, but not necessarily a real interpretation of what's happening. It's just another day. You're not losing out on a weekend. It's just another day. It's just
But you know
another
how,
day.
but Dr. V, you know how we live nowadays, right? Majority of our population lives from weekend to the weekend, and then the Friday comes, and we have intoxication, we have, I don't know, huge alcohol consumptions, other substances, running away from the reality, or flooding one-way tickets to some kind of ashram and expecting that everything will change. I think it's a new wave, right? That, I don't know, when I went to one of the ashrams in India, and I do recall one thing. I went to this town where everyone comes to enhance their spiritual experiences, but the only thing I felt there was just a lot of pain and the fear to admit that pain and actually to live through that painful experience. So that's also causing a bit of the question. So what would you say to someone who is currently listening to us and is stuck into predefined experiences and they just finding it difficult to get out of that box?
Well, I'm all for it. Like, go to all the ashrams, do all the ayahuasca that you feel is right for you, or mushroom experiences, or whatever is right for you is right for you. I'm not saying do it or don't. I'm saying do that which is right for you. I'd also say I have a cat named Tabby. She's scared of the world. Like, she just is. She is the sweetest cat. She just wants to sit in your lap all day. Like, that is her purpose in life. Her dharma is sitting with you. That is
Beautiful.
it. It is, but she's very fearful. And so when new people come in, you hardly ever see her. She scatters. In fact, she's so fearful. There are times when, in her fear of trying to escape something, she will literally run herself into the wall, full speed. You're like, what you're running from is so much worse than what you did. Like, what you just did to yourself is so much worse than what you're running from. Like, you silly cat. Why would you do this? You cause more harm than that fear that you have ever could. And I think a lot of times life is like that for us. We're so intent on running away from this thing we're afraid of that we smack into another wall, because it's very hard to chart a path of where you want to go when you're just running from that. Now, don't get me wrong. As someone that's been on food stamps and been in dangerous situations, sometimes you need to run. It's okay. But again, I go back to that space between stimulus and response, because if your running is going to smack you into another wall harder than what you're running from could ever, you need to take a moment and just expand that space so you can make better decisions. There are times it is dangerous and you need to run, but between every stimulus and response, there is that moment. And that is the moment of brilliance. That is the moment of self-determination. That is the moment where wisdom comes in. And so for me, yoga, meditation, self-discovery has always been about expanding that moment. I'm in prison, but not of prison. This space might feel really tight and really small, and it is, because I am being handcuffed and chained to a murderer and pushed on a journey. But there's a sliver, and in that sliver, I can decide, do I want to see the humanity in this murderer that I'm chained to? Or do I want to sit here and just be fearful that I'm chained to this person? You will probably experience discomfort and pain and wrong being done to you in your life. Your interpretation and experience of that is your choice. And that is not me inviting the universe to give me more pain and more practice. But it is a very specific way of dealing with the pain and stimulus that comes your way, because you still have choice in how you perceive and how you choose to experience it. And it's not always easy.
It's not, but it's possible. I do recall how Dan Tyre told me, but he was not that positive his whole life, actually. There was a shift at some point, and he was like, hey, why am I so grumpy? I want to be positive. And then he read some book, and he just completely retrained and shifted his mindset.
Yeah. And like, even your experience of being in this, which should be this holy place, and you experiencing as, I think this is a place where people come, and I'm paraphrasing and co-opting, right? But to dump a bunch of their junk, and I don't like it. Okay, that you have the right. That's a valid experience. And what an incredible thing to be able to step back in the moment and say, this is not that for me. For me, this may not serve me. That doesn't invalidate it for any. That's what people get caught up in. If somebody says this doesn't work for me, this religion doesn't work for me, that somehow it's an attack on validating what works for them. And it's not. It can be true for me and not true for you. Two things can be true at the same time.
And what are your non-negotiables for success and resilience? And perhaps maybe a bit of also life experiences.
Yeah, I think at this stage of my life, telling the truth matters to me. And I'm willing to pay a very high price to do it. And as much as I don't always like the consequences of it, I accept them. It is the exchange, not the cost, but the exchange for telling the truth. And for me, that doesn't mean you tell the truth always to other people, but you have to tell it to yourself. You have to tell it to yourself. I think where people get into a lot of challenges is they not only lie, but then they believe the lie. As opposed, like, I'm very much I don't like that you did that. I am willing to accept that you did that. And in my acceptance, I accept and move on. So truth, it's around a lot of truth. For me, it's around a lot of boundaries, my boundaries. People will say, you're so brave, you told this story or whatever. Telling this truth didn't violate one of my boundaries. So I can tell it. There's things that I actually don't say or share. It gets worse, folks. A lot worse than what's in that book. They're like, your truth is so brave. I'm like, oh, if you only knew what I wasn't telling you.
It's just a tip of an
So
iceberg.
I think it's truth. I think it's boundaries. Yes, really, literally. The next book I'm writing, now this was hard to write, but hold on, let me answer. Truth, boundaries, and a lot of what my Aunt Jan used to give me, which is you are absolutely okay exactly how you are in this moment with what you're doing, with the information you have. My son's going to get married and they're looking at wedding planning and where they want it and how they want it and what they're thinking. And they ask me, all the time, both he and his fiance. And I say, whatever y'all want to do is fine with me. And she's like, well, what do you think about this? And literally, whatever you want to do is fine. So trust and boundaries and acceptance.
Trust, boundaries, acceptance. A very wise auntie, I have to tell you.
For me, like restraint is release in practice. And I've held on to that for a very long time. And it is the restraining of my personal feelings being projected onto someone else that is also a boundary. It's not just a boundary that you can't violate for me. It's a boundary that I refuse to violate for you. People get that. People forget.
So, Dr. V, we're going closer to the end, but I still would like to touch base also your one of the life roles, and I wouldn't call it the careers. For me, it's more like experiences as a book author. You did write your book, Fix Your Face and Watch Your Tone, which I found very knowledgeable when it comes to what's actually happening in the workforce, and especially if you're climbing the leadership ladders, which I've never chose to do. And I would always just see the surface, but really allowed me to understand better on the root cause, how actually, what are the challenges women face when it comes to leadership and also working in such companies. So I would like to know, how did this whole book come into place on the first note? And I did hear some rumors about the second book coming up.
So I only started telling my truths at the age of 48. So I'm 51 now. It hasn't been that long. And I am not motivated by dreams. I'm motivated by nightmares. I'm motivated by what I don't do. That's what haunts me, not what I could do. And so this book, all those times where you're like, oh, I should have said this. Man, I should have said that. I can't believe I didn't say that. That's what this book was. It was all the things I wanted to say, but didn't. It was my clap back. It was my justice moment. It was my acknowledgement that you have violated boundaries. That's what this book is about. All the boundaries that have been violated. And what I would have done differently and what I want other people to do so that it doesn't happen to them. And now that's the intention. It is giving voice to these things that have happened. So it wasn't so much brave as it was the avoidance of nightmares, the things that kept me up at night. And women, fix your face, watch your tone. Women know what's needed. We do. And we do so much of it. But there is this other layer in the corporate space that we may not have known about or been told about. Especially, again, it goes back to having that guide. If your mother didn't navigate the corporate space, but your mother was the parent that raised you, you have this inherent lack of knowledge, a non-privilege, if you will, of just not knowing that information. And I wanted to give this guidebook and say, here's your Cliff Notes. Here's your catch-up. Here's your equalizer. Here's your equity. Here's the stool to see over the fence. Now, what you see is on you, but you deserve to see over the fence. Here you go. That's what it was. That's what it is. The second book, Fix Your Face and Watch Your Tone, Hard Lessons, Simple Truths. This is a tough one because here I tell more of my truth that is hard to discuss, and that is not in the first book or not expanded upon in the first book. And there's things that, I hadn't shared with my children. There's things I hadn't gone in depth about with my partner, with my husband, but it's things that are true. Unfortunately, everything in the book is true. I wish it wasn't true. I would love for this to be fiction. Nah, I'm here for the experience. So this book is around 4 core lessons that you need to know in the business space. You need to understand these lessons. And these are lessons you learn all through your life, but you forget to apply them, or you haven't looked at them clear enough to apply them to the business sense, but you better know them. And so that's what the second book is, along with some very personal and painful stories.
I think some kind of tours with the book, and or how do you grow your community when it comes to the impact you're creating?
I'm terrible at this. I'm terrible at this. Like, the only thing I charge for is my book. I'm so bad about it. And I'm working on that. It's an opportunity for me. I do a lot of talking on stages large and small because I want to get the word out. I do a lot of podcasts because the truth of the matter is I feel very strongly the pull that I don't have much more time on this earth to do all the things I want to do. It's a very loud, it was a whisper and now it's this roar in my mind. There's not enough time. There's not enough time to leave this world better. There's not enough time to equal out all that you've taken from the world and to equal out that give back.
So, what's your mission ahead of you right now in the upcoming years? Where can people follow your journey?
So I have a YouTube, Dr. V Boykin, DrVBoykin. That is the same as my LinkedIn. That is the same as my website, drvboykin.com. And I try my best to post on there where I will be talking, to share out the information. I don't want to be rich. I've been well off, and boy, did it come with some problems. I don't want to be famous, but boy, do I want the lessons that I share to enrich people and to be famously known so that people I don't want you to touch the hot stove. I've already touched it. It's hot. It's hot.
Right. I do have a tradition in this podcast, so I ask every guest to leave us with a thought to ponder after the episode. What would be your thought question for the audience who is here today with us, just heard your story, and will continue their day?
I would say to really sit with yourself and ask yourself, how often do you fix your face and watch your tone to the detriment of your authenticity and to the silencing of your purpose?
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. V, for jumping into Perception Paradox. I'll leave all the links in the podcast description. And I guess good luck with your big mission, and we will follow your journey. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me and allowing me to share. I appreciate it.